So we have the two sides continuing to talk. We have reports now in science that there may be some signings of memoranda of understanding, maybe some softening in terms of that March 1st deadline based on some of the comments we've gotten in recent days. Do you think we get a deal, and do you think we get a deal that's effective at this point?
Well, listen, I'm not going to preempt the announcement from the administration. They're still talking today. They've worked very hard at getting something done. We have to remember that the commitment from the administration, the president, and Robert Lighthizer and his team have been to address the fundamental issues that are much more than just things like how much natural gas or soybeans or anything else the Chinese purchased to help short-term with the trade deficit. These fundamental issues must be dealt with, and not only must they be dealt with, but if there is an agreement, there has to be clear language discussing the verifiability of them adhering to the agreement, and then strong repercussions for them not agreeing to or not staying with the agreement as they agreed to. And I have full confidence that that will be the case. You got to remember, there were a lot of people running around saying the sky's falling, these tariffs are going to kill the economy, all this kind of stuff that was going on. And understandably, skeptics before things were put in place. But now that they've been put in place and around for a year, what do we have? We have record-setting earnings in 2018 for everybody involved in our economy, a very strong economy, and we're going to have another strong one in 2019. And, those are the things that the people need to focus on. The president promised, and we worked on a 4-point strategy for improving our global competitiveness. That consisted of tax reform, trade reform, regulatory reform, and energy reform, and he's firing on all cylinders.
Dan, I want to dig into some of those tariffs a little bit more, because I know one of the burning questions for investors right now is if, in terms of this U.S.-China trade situation, if we do get some sort of deal or an extension of talks that includes tariffs not being raised to 25%, what ultimately happens to some of these duties that we do have in place, whether it's the 10% on certain goods that are imported from China or the steel and aluminum tariffs? Do you think they're here to stay?
Well, listen, I don't see the 10% tariffs that are currently in place against China disappearing, particularly when they still have only a memorandum of understanding on the fundamental issues that have to be worked through. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if they went up a little bit, but for sure they won't disappear. And neither will the other tariffs that have been put in place through the 232 programs.
I want to talk a little bit more about those tariffs through the 232 programs, the steel and aluminum tariffs. Now, I know you're a steel guy, but the Aluminum Association last week came out and basically said that record aluminum overcapacity and exports from China continued despite those Section 232 aluminum tariffs, and that it's a fundamental challenge impacting the U.S. aluminum industry today. It's not a question we ask very often, but I'm going to put it towards you. 10% tariffs on aluminum, 25% on steel. Did they go far enough to actually help boost and accelerate U.S. production?
Well, listen, I think the overall policy has been very effective. We've got the rest of the world joining in now with putting up barriers to illegally traded steel from China and other countries. But for sure, I would have thought that the aluminum tariffs would have been closer to 25%. If the 232 tariffs weren't working at the 25% for steel, that they would go up. But they are working, and both for our customers and for the steel companies. And both groups are making strong profits. And I would just make one correction. I'm a steel guy, no doubt about it. But first and foremost, I'm a manufacturing guy. And above that, I'm an American. Yeah. And these are all good for America and for the manufacturing in this country. You've seen the jobs increase dramatically under Trump because of this.
Yeah, I think few people, especially here in the U.S. and among our allies, would argue that China hasn't, essentially taken advantage of the situation and engaged in some economic policies that have benefited that country, over others. In terms of auto tariffs potentially on Europe, though, which I know the president has talked about, and they just had that report that hit his desk over the weekend, is that a good idea?
Well, listen, the auto tariffs are 232. They're not just against Europe. If they go into effect, they will be similar to the steel and aluminum. They will affect everybody. And we have serious issues. The trade issues that you alluded to where China cheats is still a big issue for all manufacturing. And if you recall, Secretary Wilbur Ross was very clear when he first came out and talked about the use of the 232, that it would be used for national security purposes to support national security, national defense sensitive industries, not just steel and aluminum, but automobiles, aerospace, outer space, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and so on. And this is part of a long-term strategy to get that level playing field and reciprocal trade to be in place with all of our trading partners. So I'm not going to jump the gun on this, but there's reasons why they're necessary. I'll give you one example if we have 30 seconds. The Chinese are now shipping parts into Canada that are supposedly being manufactured by a Canadian company for three-wheeled electrical vehicles to compete in the U.S. market. They're bringing them in through China through a Canadian company when the company itself is owned by the state of China.